Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And specifically, I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, my dear friends, on a wonderful multi-disc set release from Criterion. This is a set which has a number of feature films, all from the filmmaker or directed by the filmmaker, the great filmmaker artist who is Eric Rohmer. And this is designated by Criterion at spine number 1206. The name of this set is Eric Rohmer's Tales of the Four Seasons, Contes des Quatre Saisons. And so there are four films here. And so if it's okay with you, I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on one such work. And this is the film which is described as being from the year 1990. The name of the filmmaker is Eric Rohmer. And the name of the work is, and please pardon me for my very poor pronunciation of the language, I hope you can forgive me, Eric Rohmer, Contes des Quatre Saisons, Contes de Printemps, or A Tale of Springtime. This is the work, the utterly sublime work, brilliant film, a cycle of brilliant films from the brilliant filmmaker that is Eric Rohmer. The cycle of films is Tales of the Four Seasons, Eric Rohmer, Contes des Quatre Saisons. And please pardon me once again for my terrible pronunciation. I hope you can forgive me. But this cycle of films has among it the first of such tales, that being this film, which I'd like to talk to you about today. It's a brilliant film from the year 1990. The filmmaker is Eric Rohmer, and this is the work which is Contes de Printemps, or A Tale of Springtime. And among its utterly impeccable cast, we have, for instance, Anne Tessètre and Florence Darel and Hugues Kester and Eloise Bennett and others. They form, or they are the quartet of our main characters that we come to meet along the way, and it's a fascinating set of relationships that shift and turn and have a certain degree of, say, a dynamism and also a surprise and delight, as well as a sense of the grave and the maybe the potentially serious, and certain implications about friendships and relationships, the intimate romantic relationships, those that currently are and those that might possibly come to life, maybe depending on circumstances that may or may not be to people's likings in the film, as it were. So. And all the implications that seems to bring along with it, the baggage, if you will, of human interaction and relationships, both the good and the bad and everything in between, that I think is touched upon with such grace and style, and I think a real sense of confidence, as well as a lightness of touch, a deftness of touch that really gives us a lovely soft feel that also at the same time allows us to enjoy and appreciate and engage with many of the points of the lightness of touch, as well as the heavy points of gravity. And as I say, all the foibles and the circumstances and coincidences, or not, as the case may or may not be, that are in store for our characters here in this wonderful world that is sculpted before our very eyes by the great filmmaker and artist Eric Rohmer and company, that being A Tale of Springtime. I love this film. This is one of the greats. It's anyone who's coming to the Tales of the Four Seasons for the first time and you're watching this film, you're in for a real treat. Everything is grand and great, and this is one such example, A Tale of Springtime, Contes de Printemps. I think if we were to try to focus in on the story or plot structure, I think we could focus in on one of our main characters that we meet, I think, almost immediately from the start of the opening credits, that being the character of Jeanne. This is the Untitled character, and we understand too that she is living in sort of urban lifestyle. This is Paris. We also understand that she is she has her profession as a teacher of philosophy, which is also something that she has a personal interest in and passion for. The aspect of philosophy comes up, for example, in a very interesting, witty way, somewhat later in the film when we get an engagement with other characters that we meet. It adds a certain degree of insight into how she reacts and responds, how other characters do. It also adds a certain level of spice, for lack of a better phrase, to the conversations at hand. So it's really quite remarkable. But this is the character that we meet now. Anne Tesseggia's character, who is Jen, she we also understand that there are certain relationships that are very important to her or are close to her. For some people, maybe familial or close knit or intimate romantic relationships that might be hinted at or referred to. Some are on screen, some are off screen. So we understand that there is a certain maybe state or point in her life that she is in, both professionally and personally. But there also might be, perhaps we might read into this a kind of, maybe longing isn't the right term, but is there a sense of a quiet dissatisfaction, maybe a feeling of not being quite sure of her grounding in certain aspects? For instance, her relationship with one character, an intimate relationship that's implied, that is off screen, at least during the initial part of this film when we begin to meet characters like Jeanne for the first time. So this becomes, I think, an interesting way of positioning our reading of the character Jeanne as she then progresses through the film and meets other the main characters. And also this positioning, I think, is grounded to in a kind of contextualization based upon the physical spaces. Note here the way in which apartment spaces are shown here, the city apartment spaces. There are different apartments, different rooms, and she goes essentially from place to place to place in a manner that is also a kind of temporary displacement due to certain plot mechanics or plot points that lead her from one point to another point to another point. In a temporary fashion, but still in a way that is displacing. And so we see, therefore, how she responds and reacts to various physical spaces, apartment rooms that she is staying in, maybe temporarily or maybe visiting, etc. And that also brings to mind the question of, again, the reflections of how spaces are treated, or how spaces are somehow or another reflections of the people who otherwise inhabit them or not. And also note, therefore, how the Jeanne character responds to the various rooms that she's in throughout the course of the film. And that includes the ways in which she responds to that via flowers, for instance. And that also allows, I think, the possibility for the motif of the flower, which becomes a very key one, especially when we consider how, also in terms of visual motifs and also psychological motifs, this film is linked to the idea of blooming, or a kind of awakening a la the season of springtime. So this is something to keep in mind. But that's not all, of course, because we also understand that through a set of maybe linkages, acquaintances of acquaintances of acquaintances, or a kind of this idea of a temporary displacement and other plot points. We also find her in her social gathering, and at the social gathering she happens to meet a young woman. This is Florence Dahl's character. This is Natasha. And Natasha and Jeanne have they hit it off immediately. There's an immediate rapport, and they become quite close friends quite quickly. But what's so wonderful about this is that it feels very organic and very natural. I mean, it does happen in life. One can meet someone and then hit it off with them almost immediately, and then become very close and feel like you can speak a lot about certain maybe quiet or intimate moments with this person, and that has a freshness and a kind of vitality, which I think we might posit, or we might interpret is something that Jeanne, the antecedent character, is not only welcoming but really finding a lot of emotional nourishment from. And it's a real wonderful delight to see the two characters, Natasha and Jeanne, and their rapport together. This is one of the key uh, points of the heart and soul of the film, their rapport, their dialogue, and the points of details that they speak about. It's also interesting to note the young woman, Florence Darel's character Natasha, and her musical background, her ability to play the piano, and how this also has very much like the point of philosophy with the character of Jeanne, the point of music and the piano with the character of Natasha, how this plays a role too of adding a certain degree of insight and spice to the other relationships when we have more of the other main characters enter into the picture. But here, speaking of the other characters, this also adds a level of plot intrigue because we also understand that Natasha has a father, and this is the Hugues Kester character, who is Igor. And Igor at the moment is going out with, or has a girlfriend who is Eve. This is Eloise Bennett character, and we will meet these two a little bit later in the film. Now, when we do, we also have certain inklings or emotional rumblings or maybe feelings or intuitions that are hinted at, but also maybe directly posited or routed here. In that Natasha, who is right, having the familial relationship, the parent-child mother, I'm sorry, father-daughter relationship with the father Igor, seems to have certain misgivings or maybe feelings of not liking the character of Eve. This is Igor's girlfriend, and so this then leads to a certain degree of possibility and intrigue as to what will happen with the state of affairs vis-a-vis the relationship between Igor and Eve, and what will happen with the state of affairs vis-a-vis the possibility of some kind of other type of relationship occurring. And this is where we have Natasha bringing Jeanne to meet Igor and Eve. They go to a sort of a country house setting, which also introduces another element of space and environment, but also the outdoors as well. So it adds a sense of the romantic and the natural to the environment as well. Thus, a further visual motif linkage with this idea of springtime, printemps. And then the intrigue builds upon itself builds and builds and builds because we also see various pressure points, certain points where the relationships have the possibility of breaking. And I speak about, say, the relationship between, say, Igor and his girlfriend Eve, or the relationship between Eve and the daughter Natasha, and also the relationship between Igor and Jeanne, the philosophy teacher, the antecedent character, and also perhaps possibly potentially the relationship between the women, the two friends who met at the party earlier in the film, that being Jeanne and the daughter Natasha. So there are possibilities of formation and connection. There are also possibilities of disintegration and breakup. And when those occur, what will happen in terms of picking up the pieces? Who will form connections with whom? What kinds of connections will they make? Are these connections genuine and authentic, or are they being manipulated in a way, almost in a Machiavellian way, that might be a turnoff to one character or another? After all, there's something quite grand and romantic about a kind of a naturally growing or naturally inclined relationship that blossoms on the one hand versus something that is maybe designed or not predestined but somehow or another planned in advance by someone else. And so whether that affects any of the new relationships going forward or not is one of the, I think, emotional and indeed perhaps philosophical underpinnings that guides us through a watch of this film, A Tale of Springtime or Conte de Printemps. So there is so much packed in there, and I've tried. I've just in my own bumbling, terrible way, I've tried to find my way through this plot. But for me, this is, and I know for a lot of people, Eric Rohmer's films are sublime and just inviting and warm and conscious, and also filled with much thought and degree of, say, dialogue sharpness and a kind of truth and genuine authenticity on the one hand, and also a kind of directness that sometimes can lead to very bitter, sometimes even confrontational and sharp and biting moments. I mentioned before the possibility not just of connections between people, but also of disintegration. I'm sorry, destruction. Disintegrating relationships of friends who might have been friends or lovers before, but now the relationships are ended. So this becomes part of the milieu, part of the flow of life, as it were, and it's things that I think viewers like myself, I can understand to a certain degree. I've had relationships in my life, friends and intimate relationships that have been made and that have been lost for one reason or another, and everything in between. And so, to a certain degree, I can relate on the one hand, but also marvel and be curious, and also be in suspense, because there are some turns in this film that could be said to be unexpected. There are some places that the film might be suggesting in terms of expectation, but then it may or may not go that route. And so that's part of the fun of watching a film like Eric Rohmer's A Tale of Springtime. It is a drama, it is a romance film, it is also, I think, in many ways a kind of suspense film in a very fun and entertaining way. And I think, too, we are engaged with the film because of, among other things, the brilliance of the performances that is guided by their gestures, the way they carry themselves in their performance, and also the words that they are speaking. So I want to applaud and commend the great performances here. I mentioned too, for instance, there are some moments of dialogue that might seem somewhat maybe esoteric or out of reach. I mentioned the Jeanne character and how this introduces an element of philosophy and teachings. And so there is a particular moment, one of the famous moments in the film, where the four of them, the main characters, are together. And that includes Igor and Eve, and where Eve is talking about synthetic judgment, a priori synthetic judgment, so and other things which could be seen as being completely over the head. It certainly is for the case of the young woman, the daughter Natasha, which is perhaps an example. It serves as an example of the kind of resentment that she feels towards her father's girlfriend here, and perhaps we as viewers are invited as well to feel a kind of sense of antagonism. And so here we have Eve speaking in a way that we see the daughter, Natasha, Florence Daher character, visibly maybe resenting, and this could be an example of a further reason why the daughter is resenting her father's girlfriend. And so it becomes this interesting way in which an important component of Jeanne's life seems to be used in a way, in an unexpected way, but used in a way that is, I think, refreshing, but also insightful in terms of the character trajectory, but used in a delightfully unexpected way, because it's we see how Eve, the girlfriend, Louise Bennett, which is another great performance, by the way, how she uses it in a way to try to maybe show her intelligence to not just Igor, but to the new visitor of the household, that being Jeanne. But also Jeanne is given the opportunity to respond to this, and it's also a showing of a kind of earnest attempt in terms of addressing her students and the teaching surroundings and the environment. After all, she is a teacher. philosophy. So it becomes this very interesting interplay that we can, as viewers, engage with in a whole multitude of possibilities. Either we can engage with the words directly in terms of judgments and synthetic judgments, and how we might ponder how that actual philosophical underpinning may or may not, as the case may be, apply to our viewership of the relationships that are expounding before our very eyes as we watch the film. Or we might take the words not at face value, but we might be able to take the words as they are, as a type of maybe exercise in sort of maybe erudite loftiness. And so in which case that also, I think, gives us an insight into the characters, Jeanne and Eve in particular, but also how other characters are reacting, that being the Kester character, Igor, and then also the Florence Dahl character, Natasha. So there are a multitude of ways, I think, that dialogue and word choice serve the function in how we as viewers can engage with this. And it's a remarkable achievement. So we can look at the words at face value, and or we can take a step back and maybe consider the words, or just the utility of words, or the futility of words, and how that itself, utility or futility as the case may be, still serves a type of a character function and insight, and part of the character arcs of Eric Rohmer and company. Now, not just the words, of course, but also the gestures and the emotional outbursts, and the grand sweep, because there are so many of these lovely points of, say, emotional heartbeats that are shown. They could be quiet ones, or they could be moments of sudden, maybe affronting type of confrontational aspects. And so I must say kudos to all the actors here who give tour de force performances all around. For instance, Florence Dahl, who plays the young woman Natasha, whose father is Igor. She has a lovely, delightful, a youthful vitality to her that doesn't. That also doesn't. How should I put it? That also has a sense of an intellect that may or may not be totally up with all the fine details of, say, philosophical discussions to be had between Eve and Jeanne, for instance. But there is. This is a young woman who is young, youthful, and she is, of course, very talented in terms of her musical skills with the piano. There's also something of a thinking process, and we understand that she is thinking or considering or wondering. And this may or may not be to her detriment. You'll have to watch the film to find out in terms of the plot points. But my point here is that I love how Florence Dahl, her performance here, we see her thinking maybe a couple steps ahead of some of the other characters in a way, which maybe this might be to her advantage or not, in terms of what it is that she is maybe thinking or planning or wondering or hoping, especially in the context of her relationships with her father Igor, and then also with her new friend. This is Jeanne. So what a brilliant performance by Florence Dahl. I mentioned Eloise Bennett, who plays Eve, who is perhaps of the four, is positioned in a way to be the least likable of this quartet of characters, but I don't think that's the case. I think there are ways in which her performance in particular shows a kind of vulnerability and kind of breakdowns, and possible breakdowns, emotional breakdowns, that I think indicate a sense of maybe self-confidence or maybe lack thereof, and how the relationship that she has with Igor is, I think, very poignant, and I think something that she is getting a certain degree of emotional fulfillment from, despite the fact that maybe others, Natasha in particular, might not see it the same way. But I think that those sorts of subtle gestures and details from Eloise Bennett, I think, serve the film so magnificently. So that's another brilliant performance. And then, speaking of Igor, the father, Hugues Kester, the commanding nature of his presence, the voice. There is also a kind of fallibility about him. There is a sense that he is maybe wanting, seeking, yearning, but maybe there might be a sense too of the impatient about him, and I think that show and that ability to portray that balance of seemingly contradictory points in the performance is truly dazzling. So Hugues Kester, incredibly powerful, and then the other arguably the main character of our film here. This is Antecedros Jeanne. This is a tour de force. This is a kind of master class. I mean, they're all master classes in terms of actors' performances. I think this is truly a magnificent performance, and the way that she can show emotion and also hide emotion. There is a way in which her face registers a kind of some points where she's registering frustration and even contempt at some points, but it is just held back, but also shown just enough so that we as viewers can feel and know almost precisely what it is she's feeling. So in many ways, in this world where words are so important in terms of the mind and the pen of Eric Rohmer, it's so amazing to have a character like Jeanne and others here, and the performances here, such as Antecedros' performance, which can show so much through the words, can also show so much without words as well, and the way in which she is able to express herself. I mean, there's some real key, intense emotional moments, and even in those intense emotional moments, sometimes she relies on a kind of silence. Other times she relies on a strength of the words, and I mean this in a positive way. There's a strength in the way in which there are moments where her performance calls for her character to be, or demands her character to be commanding in her verbosity. So it's a tour de force performance among many tour de force performances all around. A Tale of Springtime. This is a film. This is a film magnifique. This is a magnificent work, and I love too how it is. It's also in terms of its filmmaking, seemingly in terms of its visual style. To one can say, and I don't mean this disparagingly. I mean this wholly positively. It has a beautiful, modest approach to it. I mean, there is, I think, a very straightforward manner in which the cameras are set up, in which the movement is shown, in which dialogue is considered, camera motions, camera movements are shown, but it doesn't say give us a sense of the overly showy or the overly flashy, in a manner of speaking. We always are able and permitted as viewers to keep our interest and our focus on the proceedings of the work, while also enjoying, in a kind of almost a painterly aspect, the lights and details of the decor. And again, the more that we examine the decor, the more we realize, and also the links between the decor and the emotional arcs of the film. Going back to something I mentioned earlier about the emotional states of the characters, such as Antecedros Jeanne, and the rooms that she is inhabiting or visiting, and the like. And so how that also becomes another, how should I say, a visual style of the film, namely seeing the details that we can spot, in particular the flowers, and this reminding of flowers and blooming and springtime, the potential of things to grow and to be born and to become alive, or not, as the case may be. So this is my very meandering way to say that I think this is a delightful film. I know I'm not the only one who shares that view. And I know I'm not the only one who shares that view with respect to the works of Eric Rohmer. But for those who are new to the world of Eric Rohmer and are interested in watching an Eric Rohmer film, this is a great place to go. And it's sublime, utterly sublime. This is the work, again, which is from 1990. It is Eric Rohmer's Tales of the Four Seasons, A Tale of Springtime. The Criterion Collection has released this film, A Tale of Springtime, Conte de Printemps, as part of this multi-disc set. This is the Blu-ray set that I have here. 4 Blu-ray discs, one film per disc plus a number of supplements, which we'll talk about as we proceed through our discussions of each of the films. By the way, too, we'll have another video discussion as well, talking about overall aspects of the set, packaging. There's also the great booklet, which has a wonderful comprehensive essay, but we'll talk about the comprehensive essay in a separate video. But for now, let us focus our attention on specific aspects of the disc that includes the film A Tale of Springtime, the film that we're talking about right now. With respect, for instance, to the presentation or masters, I'm looking at the staple booklet, the wonderful stapled booklet with robust pages, etc. On page 26 thereof, I quote, the new digital masters presented here were created at Digimage in Paris from the 35mm original camera negatives for A Tale of Springtime, A Tale of Summer, and A Tale of Autumn, and from the 16mm original camera negative for A Tale of Winter, and restored in 2K resolution. The original monaural soundtracks were remastered from the magnetic tracks. So I admit to not knowing, not having a strong knowledge base when it comes to, say, the release history of these films over time. And so, unfortunately, I can't compare it very well to say any other physical media releases, unfortunately. So I apologize for that. But based on my own subjective experiences and also my engagement with the work and how I feel about, say, the kind of diffuse nature of some of the ways in which emotions are shown, and then all of a sudden when they're the kind of outbursts as well as the kind of receding back as part of the emotional ebb and flow of the character developments here. I find the presentation to be very much apropos and akin to that kind of style. There's a softness in the lighting. It is springtime. The motif, visually speaking, is springtime, but there are oftentimes moments where rooms are the focal center point of, say, the setting, and so we have sometimes those rooms are lit through a single window source, or maybe sometimes we are in a yard that is full of bright sunshine. But then also there are times when the light can be very soft, and also a kind of it has I think a soft almost pastel-like quality to it, which I think is also very apropos. So that has a kind of sense of brightness, but also a receding at the same time, which is, again, I think very much in keeping with the way that emotions are shown. They are sometimes expressed and sometimes they recede back, and sometimes that's done naturally or organically. Other times it's done with a sense of purpose or planned almost manipulation on the parts of some of the plot points. So in any event, I'm very pleased with how this looks and sounds in terms of my own, albeit, and I admit, limited knowledge base in terms of the release history of this film up to the Criterion release. But I'm so far I'm quite impressed with this indeed, how this looks and sounds. And then we go to the menu here. I have the disc in the machine right now. It's a lovely Blu-ray menu design. I really enjoy it here with some shots of the characters here. We have, for instance, our four main characters together in one of the scenes involving the house setting and the yard, etc. And then we have Antecedra and Florence Darel here as well. So it's great. I love it. But if we were to go to the supplements menu, we have three supplements that are listed here. First is Eric Rohmer on A Tale of Springtime. When I press it, it says, and I quote, "In this excerpted audio interview conducted by film critic Serge Danet in 1990, director Eric Rohmer discusses his concept for Tales of the Four Seasons and the making of the cycle's first installment, A Tale of Springtime." This is approximately 4 minutes. I think it's quite good, quite serviceable, but I wouldn't necessarily. I would say that it has more to do with sort of his approach to the cycle overall. There are questions about for instance, where does a film begin and where does a film end, and that leads into discussion point about what Eric Rohmer's plans are for the films going forward. So he does talk about how he wants to space them out over a period of a couple years. And he does have a plan of making all the Four Seasons films, beginning with this film, which is A Tale of Springtime. And also there's a discussion point here about, for instance, would he be up for the challenge of making all four films within a single year, or time spent with a single year example? We know, of course, that that didn't happen. They were made over the course of many years throughout the 1990s. But these, and also how maybe certain points might be relevant to other past works of Rohmer. We are reminded of the other cycles that he is very famous for, the comedies and proverbs, for instance, and also the Six Moral Tales. So this becomes yet the start of yet another cycle of works. So in that way, I think it's very insightful and quite engaging. I wouldn't say, however, it doesn't necessarily go directly into specifics of the film itself per se. It does speak a little bit about A Tale of Springtime, but it doesn't go, I would say, into many specific details. So I would consider this more a kind of maybe introduction jumping off of of A Tale of Springtime's the film itself, but this serves as a kind of introduction, a sort of maybe point about the approach to the Tale of Four Seasons with A Tale of Springtime as a kind of example or guiding force example. So that's not in any way detriment to this, but just keep that in mind. This is, I think, to my mind at least anyway, it's not as A Tale of Springtime centric as much as I think it is more kind of grounded in sort of Eric Rohmer's approach. As he will take the Four Seasons, but that doesn't make it any less engaging or insightful. In fact, it's really quite wonderful indeed. So this is approximately 4 minutes, and it's one of these things where you have an audio interview, but you have or an excerpted audio interview, but you have playing on the background these moving the visual thing of a moving kind of tape recording thing, which is with a color hue to it. So that's really interesting. But anyway, so that's the first one that's up here. And then, excuse me, the second one that's up here is the Kreutzer Sonata. This 1956 short film by Eric Rohmer stars the director as a husband whose jealousy over his wife's admiration for a musician turns deadly. So this is the work, which is approximately 44 minutes, La Sonate à Kreutzer, and it stars, among others, Françoise Martinelli, Eric Rohmer, and also features, well, let me leave it at that, because there are also some people who are featured here, which I think is part of the fun and delight of watching this film for the first time. So this short film, approximately 44 minutes, it is also a really fascinating film, which I can understand its coupling with this film, A Tale of Springtime. After all, it is found as a supplement to the disc where A Tale of Springtime is housed for purposes of this Criterion release. And I can kind of understand why. The film itself is one that has to do with music, and of course music is a key motif in the film A Tale of Springtime. And also music in both films could be said to be a kind of driving force that intensifies or potentially serves to intensify some of the groundings of the emotional relationships, whether it turns into sources of, say, jealousy or maybe satisfaction or dissatisfaction, or maybe a kind of free will and self-expression. And one can say, therefore, that in that way, the musical or the music motif has a certain commanding presence in both of the narratives of the films, respectively. Though one can say also that they make arguably quite different conclusions. I mean, one can say that the short work, Kreutzer Sonata, might take a different path than, say, the path of the musician in A Tale of Springtime. But again, if you're interested, you're going to have to watch the film to find out, because it's another quite magnificent work. And it's great to see Françoise Martinelli and also Eric Rohmer as well here and in this 1956 film. So please check this out if you can. This is really great. So this is approximately 44 minutes. And then last but not least, we have a trailer. This is a great trailer, though I must say that this is a trailer that is focusing in not specifically and exclusively on A Tale of Springtime per se, but it is focusing in on the Four Seasons. So you'll get clips and a trailer of all the films in the Four Seasons cycle. So that's A Tale of Springtime, and then A Tale of Winter, and then A Tale of Summer, and then A Tale of Autumn as well. So it's a trailer for the tales of the Four Seasons overall, rather than a specific springtime trailer. But that's okay. That's not a problem at all. It's great to have this trailer and how it's being marketed for today's audiences, as it were. Because I do want to say, or I do want to stress that there is a kind of timeless quality to this film. I think this film has it feels very fresh and very invigorating. And I mean, maybe it's due to my own, say, age. I was born in '79. I grew up in the '80s and then into the '90s. And so from my own perspective, this film released in 1990 still feels like a new and fresh film. And I think also that could be said in terms of its content and style and dialogue. There's a kind of timeless quality to it, while it's also expressing aspects or contextualizing it in a kind of environment, which I think makes this film, and indeed the other films which we'll talk about, quite powerful, engaging, indeed, even when one watches it in 2024. Or perhaps they become more potent as time passes, which is, I think, a powerful testament. And I think about it too, just in the context overall of my own feelings on the works of Eric Rohmer that I've had the good fortune of being able to have seen over the course of my life thus far. And I'm finding more and more that the older I get, the more love I have for the works of Eric Rohmer. It's quite amazing, and that's certainly the case for films like these, the Tales of the Four Seasons films, and the film like this, A Tale of Springtime. And the more I think about it, the more I watch it, the more I find I'm just loving it more and more and more and more. And I hope you feel the same way, my dear friends. But in any event, that is the state of things with regard to the supplements which can be found on the Blu-ray disc of A Tale of Springtime. So one of the 4 discs. So I would say that when we get to some of the other supplements on some of the other discs, in particular when we talk about the next film or the next disc's supplement, A Tale of Winter's disc supplements, there might be a supplement there where it's a bit more comprehensive, going to a little bit of detail in terms of the Four Seasons overall, and also Eric Rohmer's style and people that he worked with. That might also serve as a type of primer to the world of the Tales of the Four Seasons. And so if you feel like so far maybe the number of supplements here might seem a bit underwhelming on paper, if you feel that way, that's, I think, a very reasonable critique to have so far. But please note, however, that there are other supplements that might serve what you're looking for, and so we'll talk about that. In particular, let's keep an eye out for the supplements that we can find that are part of this next disc, Tale of Winter, but we'll talk about that in a separate video when we talk about Conte d'Hiver. One other thing too before we finish is the booklet, which is a similar thing, which is this booklet. It has a comprehensive essay by Imogen Sarah Smith. It's a great essay. It's a comprehensive one, so it's talking about all the films and going into some really great detail on each of the films and how they're kind of intertwined in the space, which is wonderful. So, but there is some in that discussion, Imogen Sarah Smith does go into A Tale of Springtime specific discussions. So please check those out if you can. But I will talk about the essay in a separate video discussion when we talk about overall points and comments about the release writ large. But so let's save our comments about the great Imogen Sarah Smith essay for another day. But for now, just keep that in mind. I would suggest to watch all the films first before reading the comprehensive essay. And in fact, I would take a step back and say I would strongly recommend watching all of the films first, and then you can go into the supplements, including the supplements that I've just outlined here that are found on the Tale of Springtime disc. Just in case, I think there's a kind of way in which the supplements do touch on other films, not just the ones that are the feature film on that particular disc. So just in case if you are keen on a kind of approach the supplements in that way, so looking at the Tales of the Four Seasons overall. I should point out also, excuse me for neglecting this, but although the booklet does have the comprehensive essay on other pages, there are film-specific pages here. So a Tale of Springtime section with a synopsis and a description of cast and crew credits, as well as an interesting montage here, which is again mirroring what we have in the Blu-ray menu, can be found on pages 4 and 5 of the booklet. So please check that out if you can. All right, so I think let's leave it there, and of course we'll pick up the conversation when we get to the next film in the cycle, and that film is A Tale of Winter, Conte d'Hiver. So if you're interested, my dear friends, I look forward to seeing you at the next video discussion, where we will talk about the next film in Eric Rohmer's Tales of the Four Seasons. But my dear friends, until the next one, please continue to be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including Eric Rohmer's Tales of the Four Seasons, including other Eric Rohmer films, including other films in the Criterion Collection and beyond. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.